60% mental and 40% physical.
Math was never our strong suit, but breaking down Ohio State football is. Sit back and join us for Buckeye Grove Instant Access, part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You can do it!
Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. Post-game thoughts, immediate analysis, and much, much more to put the big game into perspective. Without any further delay of game, here's your host, Kevin Noon.
Kevin, goddammit.
Hey, welcome into the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. Of course, I'm joined as always with Braden Moles and Keaton Maisano here on Big Noon Saturday. And the Buckeyes took care of business. They are now 8-0 after a 38-7 win over the Wisconsin Badgers against a rainy backdrop at Ohio Stadium. It was a game that had a little bit of everything, a slow start, some exciting moments, some great individual performances, and at the end of the day, everybody got what they wanted, a big Ohio State win.
I mean, this is kind of the signature win they've been looking for all season. I mean, you weren't ever really going to find that against, Michigan State or Northwestern, but this is the game everything has kind of been building up to, and they responded incredibly in this game. I mean, it was a little slow going at first, but we didn't have the second quarter of doom like we've had in some previous games. But as the game went on, Ohio State just kept the pedal to the metal, and they really just took over the game eventually on defense and on offense.
Yeah, and this is, like Braden said, the signature win, but this is the first team that they played that could really have the talent to put up some resistance against Ohio State, and that's what showed kind of in the first half. And Ohio State had to learn to manage a game. It wasn't going to come easy to them, and I think Ryan Day really coached well at the end of that second half, and then Ohio State exploded in the second half after giving up a score to Wisconsin to make it a 3-point game. So Ohio State responded very well on the national spotlight, and I think Ohio State, it really looks like this team was not just a mirage playing a bunch of bad teams, that they can hang with anybody and they can dominate anybody.
Everybody knew that Ohio State was going to need to be able to run the ball in this game, and they ran for 264 yards. This game was going to be the battle of the backs. Jonathan Taylor coming in, 5,000-yard career rusher. J.K. Dobbins, we knew that he probably was going to hit 1,000 yards in this game. He only needed like 53. Coming out of the game, I'm not going to put you on the spot and say, well, who's the better running back altogether, but we know who had the better day for certain.
Yeah, I mean, I think, these are both, J.K. Dobbins and Jonathan Taylor, these are both incredible backs. We both know that. And for Dobbins having such a great game today and Taylor having not such a great game, that doesn't really change anything about how we should view them because, they're going to come back next week. Wisconsin's going to come back when they play again, and Taylor's probably going to continue on where he was. But I think it really came down to how these defenses were going to perform with, Wisconsin having the number 1 rush defense, Ohio State having the number 2 rush defense coming into this game. It was really going to come down to how the defense played because we knew how well those backs were going to play. But overall, looking at the situation, Dobbins clearly outplayed Taylor today. Now, while that may be a factor of of Ohio State's defense, there's nothing you can take away from J.K. Dobbins for the day he had today. Yeah,
exactly. You kind of hit on it. What I was going to say is just you can't take away from Ohio State's defense. I mean, Taylor was going up against a defensive line. Larry Johnson has had success against stopping running backs since he's been at Ohio State. I mean, the fewest yards that Wisconsin's gained today, total rushing yards, since they lost to Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship game 2 years ago. So, I mean, Ohio State has the history of being able to stop these kind of backs. I think Taylor was just the next guy in line that Ohio State did that to. And J.K. Dobbins was really impressive, kind of just showing what he's been showing the entire year, running hard. I mean, it kind of was encapsulated on that stiff arm that he had on a long run, and he just really is in a groove right now. I think the offensive line's in a groove, creating holes for him, and he's finding them and being patient. Really didn't get it going until the second half. So, I mean, Ohio State really impressive, really won that battle, which was being hyped up as the telling tale of who would win this game, is who would win in the trenches.
And Ohio State didn't just shut down the running game. They kept that passing game very much in check. I don't think a lot of people who really watched the tape came in saying, well, Jack Cohn's going to be a guy who's going to be able to move it up and down the field and throw for 300 yards. Well, he didn't reach 200 yards. He didn't reach 150 yards. 10 of 17 for a $108. Just not really a great day for himself. A lot of that predicated on Ohio State getting pressure on him and, another number 2 getting it done.
Yeah, I mean, it never really felt. I mean, Ohio State's secondary obviously had a good day limiting Cone to this, but it rarely even felt like the ball was getting into the secondary. I mean, Young had 2 strip sacks and 4 total sacks, but 2 strip sacks. He was just an incredible force, tying the Ohio State single game record for sacks and quickly approaching the single season record of 14 held by Vernon Golston, which we assume he will probably pass against Maryland. But yeah, just another incredibly dominating game from Chase Young, and I think at this point he's firmly entrenched himself in the Heisman conversation just with the production he has had over these first 8 games.
Yeah, and I mean, the secondary really needs to take Chase Young out to dinner or something because the way that he's been helping them throughout this entire year has been tremendous. And I think in a day where you don't really notice the secondary that much is pretty much a good day for a secondary because you're not really noticing them giving up any big plays. There's only 2 passes that were completed for more than 15 yards, and the touchdown came off of a blocked punt. So it was kind of a quick momentum change right there that kind of hurt them. But, I mean, the secondary's been solid all year, and after a year where it didn't look that good last year, it's really nice to see for Ohio State to be able to just limit the big plays, keep things in front of them, and just tackle well, which is what the secondary did. They were able to get in the run game, make some tackles, and really help out shutting down Wisconsin's rush attack.
And let's remember, when we're talking about the Ohio State defensive line, they went without 2 players right there. No Jonathan Cooper in this game, no Tyler Friday either. So, I mean, they still have just a ridiculous amount of depth. When you have the great, the best defensive player on, in college football in Chase Young, and you can still go without Coop and without Friday. I mean, that's pretty impressive in of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think depth has been an important thing that, this team has kind of talked about, and they have it pretty much every position besides quarterback, no offense to Chris Chugunov. But, depth is something they have everywhere. But this is a situation where the starters are so good that even when they don't have that depth behind them, it doesn't matter. They still had 5 sacks. I believe Devon Hamilton was the other sack besides Chase Young. So it's even if the backups are out, even if the depth is hurt, if Jonathan Cooper is out, Chase Young is still able to have this incredible production, even when one or 2 or even 3 blockers are being put on him. It doesn't matter. If there isn't depth behind him, it doesn't matter because he can do it all on his own.
Yeah, and this comes back to just recruiting the right guys, bringing them into the program, and then it's kind of iron sharpens iron. When you're going up against these guys in practice, you're making each other better. I mean, when you're watching Chase Young work, it's got to help your game develop as well. And I think that Ryan Day and all the coaches have done a great job of saying next man up and saying we got confidence with whoever we're putting out on the field. So I think that's got to give players confidence. That's got to make them feel like they can make plays. They've seen guys before them make the plays, and that's just got to help now that you're seeing it really come into fruition this year. And in a big-time game against Wisconsin, they all stepped up with some guys out for the defensive line. So, it's just proof in the pudding so far.
Exactly. We'll get back to talking about the Ohio State offense, including the day that Justin Fields had, after we hear from one of our great sponsors. Egg Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com. Welcome back here on the BIA podcast. Kevin Noon, Braden Moles, and Keaton Maisano. Going back to the Ohio State offense, we talked a little bit about J.K. Dobbins. The throw game, we really did not see much of it in the first quarter. Up and down kind of game. Probably not one of Justin Fields' sharpest games, at least statistically. 12 of 22 for $167, 2 touchdowns, no picks, sacked 5 times. That Wisconsin defense was ferocious, but a lot of credit to Justin Fields for fighting through it, and the Buckeyes finally were able to break through.
Yeah, I mean, I think that 5 sacks is kind of the biggest thing out of this performance because I don't know. I think he took 3 of those in the first quarter, maybe. So at that point, it's fair that a guy may be having some yips or seeing ghosts in terms of the pressure coming at him. So I think he recovered well after that first quarter, though. I mean, he no eye popping numbers, like Kevin said, though, avoided any big turnovers like he has in some of the other games this season. So overall, I wouldn't take much away from this performance because pass protection did not hold up like it has in a lot of other games this season. So I think he did the best he could with what he had.
Yeah, and if the worst game that we're going to see from Justin Fields is 12 for 22, 167 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air and 1 on the ground with no turnovers, then I think Ohio State's going to be sitting pretty pretty so far. And then, I mean, this is kind of the game I was waiting to see from Justin Fields. It's a game where it wasn't really clicking for him. He was going to get hit a little bit. It was a physical game because in the past you've seen Ohio State quarterbacks be able to respond and win those kind of games. I mean, just in recent memory, Dwayne Haskins didn't have his best game in Happy Valley, but still was able to get the win. And then JT Barrett kind of really came onto the scene when he got his win in Happy Valley, when he didn't really play that well. It's kind of just the ugly game, and this is not an ugly game by any sense, but Justin Fields really wasn't clicking, but he was able to get the job done, and the offense was still able to put up 38 points, so just very impressive.
And you lead right into what I was going to ask next. Ohio State wins by 31, 38-7. We've been waiting for a test. You sit there and you look at 31, and games are still going on as we're recording this. Oklahoma's fallen, so, they're probably going to be some more upsets today. Just has kind of that feeling. LSU's getting pushed by Auburn right now as we record this. Was this the test that they needed to have? Was it enough of a test?
Yeah, I mean, I think as much as you want to talk about Wisconsin's level of competition this year, which has not been, good, having the number one defense in the nation, that's not something that happens by accident, regardless of how good or bad the opponents you go against happen. That isn't something that you just stumble into, having the number one defense in the nation. It's a combination of their scheme and the athletes they're putting out on the field. And today I think it was really just a combination of being out-schemed and Ohio State putting the better athletes out on the field.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you can't devalue the test after the fact because, I mean, Wisconsin coming into this game, they're a good team. They're still a good team. I think they could play any team in the country and really play well. I think it's just that Ohio State may be that good. It might be time that we got to stop saying maybe the opponents aren't that great, but maybe Ohio State's just that much better than people to where, like, even though there is a test, I mean, they were tested up until, like, 12 minutes left in the third quarter when they started getting the offense rolling. I mean, it's just a better execution, I think, from Ohio State. They got the better players on the field right now. They have the better schemes. They have the better adjustments. I think this was a good game to see how Ohio State would adjust because there was a tight game in the second half. They were able to adjust better than Wisconsin did, and they were able to pull the game away in the second half. So I think this was a good test for Ohio State. I think they will eventually play a game where they're going to have their starters play late into the fourth quarter and actually have to execute down the stretch to win a game, but that didn't come to fruition in this game, and I think that's really going to help as far as their national perception.
Ohio State now goes into the open week, and we'll have that week and then maybe a little bit of a let-up in the schedule with Maryland coming here to Ohio Stadium and then going to Piscataway to take on Rutgers. But, let's focus going into the open week. One of the biggest priorities is going to be getting healthy. I mean, you had some players that weren't able to go. Justin Fields, he should be first one at the cold tub. I mean, he was getting popped a lot out there. I mean, it was a very physical game. I'm asking you without giving an opportunity for a lot of thought, but, what is it that they need to work on going in through this open week, not having to prepare really for an opponent? And, as pundits, we can sit there and make comments like this. You never want to hear the team say this, but I don't think they have to put in a lot of preparation for Maryland or Rutgers.
I think the one thing that they really could, it's not something that's been an issue thus far because, I mean, as we've discussed ad nauseum, that there really haven't been any overarching issues with the team. But I think preparing for that eventual 60-minute game, because they have not had anywhere close to that at all this. I mean, Chris Chugunov has gotten in every single game this season, so there has not been a game yet where they have had to have their starters on the field trying to drive to win the game for 60 minutes at all this season. So I think, getting that, Mick Marotti, working with him to get that kind of endurance in place for when they go up against maybe Penn State or whether it possibly be Michigan or Big Ten Championship, whatever it may be. Beyond that, getting those guys ready to play that long game, which they have not had to do yet this season.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess just from this game, if you're nitpicking, eliminating that block punt, I mean, that's the only reason they got their points. So you can't really afford to have those if you're playing in a very tight game down the stretch. And there was a couple where I thought Wisconsin was going to get their hands on more of their punts, so I think maybe cleaning that up a little bit. But, I mean, really outside of it, I think Day's been kind of, like, stressing this point over and over again. It's just fighting the complacency, fighting getting the distractions. If you just continue to focus week by week, I think that's what they just need to do. I mean, sometimes you just really have to – there's not something you have to correct, but there's just stuff you have to continue, and that's what Ohio State's got to do right now. Everyone's just got to get better and continue to do what they've been doing. I mean, it's worked so far, and I think if they can continue doing that, it'll continue to work.
And this will be a topic that we will continue with here next week when we do a special edition of BIA, kind of another off-week special at this point. Last question I'm going to throw at you. We kind of talked about a little bit, but I didn't tell you I was going to ask you on the air. Ohio State probably has 3 guys that you could sit there and say, well, you could probably put a little campaign together for them to go to New York with with Justin, with JK, and with Chase. Who is your Buckeye Heisman? Who, if you can only take one to New York, who are you taking to New York?
It's absolutely Chase Young. I mean, he has by far been the most consistent of all these players. I think, no offense to Fields, but I think with the performance this week, kind of the so-so accuracy, I think this game, similar to kind of what Jalen Hurts experienced today at Kansas State, I think this is kind of a game that probably cools down any of the Heisman hope a little bit for now. He could come back with a big game against Penn State, something like that later in the season. But for Chase Young, I mean, he has just been by far the most consistent player on this team every single week, at least half a sack in every game this season, and going to basically have himself on top of every single Ohio State defensive end record by the end of his career.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I was answering the question first, I would also say Chase Young just because of the performance today in the biggest game. I mean, he dominated it. He's the most impressive guy on the field. But if you're looking for an Ohio State player that you think would have the best chance to win it, then you would probably want to root for Justin Fields to continue to do better because it's been a quarterback award recently. I mean, defensive players don't get it that often. So I think Chase Young would have to threaten the all-time sacks record to really be in consideration for it because they're always going to try to lean towards a quarterback, especially because it's usually the quarterbacks that can win the day for a game. And, I would say Justin Fields right now he had 3 touchdowns today, and if he's going to have more opportunities against, like, Penn State and Michigan to show out. So I think Justin Fields right now would be, I would say, the most likely Ohio State player to win it, but Chase Young, I think, is the most deserving at the moment.
I love it when it all works out because I'm going to take the third guy at this point. I think Chase Young is the most impactful player, but we know defensive players just don't win it, so that's just going to be a problem there. I think J.K. Dobbins really emerged onto the scene. I mean, I think Ohio State fans, Big Ten fans, are aware of what he can do. I mean, he had 221 yards between rushing and receiving yards today against the number 1 rushing defense and number 1 passing defense and so on and so forth. And I think that really what he was able to do today under the backdrop of having a guy that was supposed to be potentially the Heisman, the running back Heisman guy between him or Chuba Hubbard out of Oklahoma State. And we're all talking about J.K. Dobbins at this point. So, I'm not saying Dobbins just because one said Fields and one said Young, but, I would put my money behind Dobbins at this point. Well, we're wrapping up here at the end. I'm going to give everybody a chance for one final thought, and we are going to bid you a good day.
My final thought is not about the team as a whole, but shout out Blake Hallbill, shutting down any concerns about the kicking game, over the last 2 games, the 55-yarder against Northwestern, then the 49-yard kick today in the rain. So that's kind of alleviated any concerns that, fans have had, and I'm sure Ryan Day may have had about, the ability of Hallbill to kind of come in with those clutch kicks. So, good on him for kind of showing out these last 2 weeks.
I guess my final thought would be, just as you're watching some of these top teams fall to lesser opponents, I think it's been more impressive every single week of how Ohio State's been able to improve and not have a letdown so far this year, not even just losing, but just like underperforming to what people thought they would. And they seem to be, even though people are raising the bar, Ohio State seems to be exceeding it every single time. So very impressive so far of how Ryan Day has started his head coaching career, and just interested to see if they can keep the train rolling.
My final thought is this Ohio State team is as good as advertised, but that Penn State game is going to be a pretty good monster of a game. Fortunately, it's going to be here in Columbus. We've had a couple of games where Ohio State has spotted the Nittany Lions a couple score lead and been able to gut it out in the fourth quarter. I don't think Ohio State's going to be able to get away with that. Right now as we're recording, Michigan State is on the wrong end of a pretty good thrashing by the Nittany Lions. That's going to be the game I think that everybody's going to be talking about more so than the game at the end of the year. Doesn't take anything special away from the game, but I think the game of record is going to be that Penn State game. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about that leading up as we go through the final couple weeks leading into that 2-game crucible at the end of the season. But, that's for another day, another time. I'm going to wrap up the BIA podcast. Thanks for listening. Be sure to join us at BuckeyeGrove.com for a bunch of great post-game coverage, and thanks for joining us.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game. Exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.